when you're cutting the stock, the not much to it. The only thing you want to consider really is that you don't want to put a knot in either the top or the bottom edge. For example, if I was going to cut this across here right through the knot, the piece that's left might fall out at some time, and that's kind of unsightly. And there's no real good way to put it back on. You can try gluing it, but this is going to be outside, so that's not really going to work. There's not really any good way to fix it. So you want to make sure that wherever you're starting your cut and measuring from that point onward, you don't have a big knot in the way. The other thing is, what am I going to do with the square? The other thing is the end cut might not be square, so check them before you start measuring. You may have to take, a 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch off there to square that up before you do the rest of the cutting. That's one of the reasons you always buy things a little bit longer than you need them, so you can fix any of those little defects. So we'll just lay the template on top of the piece that we're going to cut. Now, with this, something you want to be aware of, and then you'll see there's a knot right here. I don't want that to be along the edge that we cut, for the same reason I talked about when we were cutting the stock to length. If we cut through that, piece of it might fall out, and that's not going to look very good. So I'm going to avoid that. If I couldn't avoid it this way, what I would do is flip the board around to make sure that we're not going to cut into that. And we'll just lay this out and take your pencil and just go down. When you're using a pencil on this kind of wood, sometimes it doesn't show up very well, so especially a darker wood than this. If you're using redwood or something, or cypress for this, the line may not show up very well. So I'm going to go back and forth a few times to make sure that that is going to show up on there. That looks pretty good. Now I have this is the pattern for the slat that's closest to the center, and to do the other, there's going to be two of them, obviously one on each side. So to do the other one, we're just going to flip the pattern over. If the wood was the same on both sides, it wouldn't matter, but this has a rough finish on one side, and I want to keep it consistent. So one side's all rough, one side's all smooth. So we're going to go ahead and let me see something on this. There's a little ding on the side here. I'm trying to avoid putting that on there. Let me think a minute. Is this going to give us the right? No, that's not right. Can't avoid it, so that's all right. So we'll just do it this way. So I just want to make sure that you have the mirror image of the other one. Again, if the stock was the same on both sides, it wouldn't make any difference. You can mark it either way and just flip it over when you assemble it. But since we have one rough face and one smooth face, we're going to just flip that over. So again, just go down it. Make sure you make a good mark on it. And we'll just repeat this for the other ones. So that'll give us those two. Now we're going to do the next slat over, and that is this one. And again, I want to see, I'm trying, excuse me, that should be there, trying to avoid cutting through any knots. Goes this way a little bit. Yep, that's the same thing. Just barely. Okay. So we are line that up. We are just barely missing one. Oops, slide over where you can see it. We're just barely missing that, but I think we're far enough away from it. We're not going through it, just on the outer edge of it. There'll be a hard spot there next to the knot, but that's okay because we don't have to do too much with that, so that will work out good. Now, however, I just noticed we have a knot here that is partially fallen out, and I do not want that on the edge if I can avoid it. So let's try going the other way, see if that helps at all. Sometimes you got to compromise here. All right, we are. Excuse me. Move this over. The knot right here, and we'd be cutting right through it doing that, so that is not going to work. So I think we're going to have to live with this other defect here, but that's it is a garden gate, it's not a piano, so some irregularities are not going to be the end of the world. So this is the best, I think this is the best we can do, because I'd rather have that knot has already fallen out, so I don't have to worry about it. It will have a little divot in the finished product, but that's not the end of the world. One thing you might want to do, because sometimes it's a little difficult to hold the pattern, is just take a piece of painter's tape or masking tape or whatever, and just secure the pattern on there so it doesn't move on you while you're doing it. And then just go ahead and trace that out as we've done elsewhere. Okay. Now we'll take that off, flip it over, and we'll see where we are on this. We are just on the edge of a knot there. It probably would be all right, but we'd have to check it. Let's flip the board over. When you're doing this, make sure you don't flip the pattern, because again, we want to make a mirror image of each other. I'd like to avoid that knot if we can. Okay, that looks pretty good. I think we are clear of anything vital. Right here, excuse me, there's a big knot right here. However, we're not going through the knot itself, we're just going around the edges, so I think that will be okay. As I said, unless you're cutting right through it, it's usually not too big of a problem. Oops. And you can see why it's a good idea to tape it, because I just knocked it loose. All right, so that's those two. And what I'm going to do is check the drawing for a minute. This piece here is big enough to do this third slat over from the middle, so we won't have to use another piece of material to cut them out. I have extra in the sitting out in the garage, but in this way we will make use of that waste piece. So basically these two pieces will use everything, which is nice to be able to do, especially when the lumber is expensive. Yeah, if we lay this on here, this is the pattern for that last little piece. It just fits, which you would expect because of the way it's laid out. So that's good. We just have to remember when we cut this line that we need to split the line, that this other piece over here is not waste. And I just noticed that I forgot to mark the other side here when I had it open. And do it with a pencil. So you put your apron on so you have some place to put your pencil, and then you throw your pencil on the workbench and you can't find it. So once you do that, you know you're a professional. Because that is how the pros do it. And we have a number of ways we can cut this. We could take the circular saw and make straight cuts where the lines are straight, stop it short, and then come in and do the rest of it. I think what I'm going to do, since got quite a few curves here, is to use the saber saw to do it. Yeah, I think that's what we'll do. Now, I want to mention something. Clamp the stock to the bench, overhanging enough so that the saw blade won't hit the bench itself. You have to be a little careful in the corners there. You don't want to overcut those curves. So if a curve looks like that, you don't want to overdo it and cut it like that and then try to fix it, because that's a I think that marker has had it. You don't want to cut it like that and then try to fix it, because you're not going to get the curve you want, and you might have to cut quite a bit of material off there to straighten that out. So just be careful on the inside corners that you're not cutting too deep. Go slow and be kind of circumspect with it. There's a rather coarse blade in it at the moment. I'm going to change that. I don't want to rough this up any more than I absolutely have to. I don't want to go too fine, because then it'll take forever to cut it. Let's see what I have here. Alright, that looks better. I got, let's see what it says. Doesn't tell me how many teeth per inch, but that's the blade. Oops. That's the blade I'm going to use to do the cutting. And we'll flip that around, do the other side. If you have a bandsaw, that's probably the best way to do this. It's probably the least labor intensive. So, but I always try to make the project so that if you don't have a tremendous number of tools, you can still get the work done. You could do this with a handsaw and use a coping saw to cut the curves. That's a perfectly decent way to do it. That would take some time, however, and I would like to try to get this done in a reasonable amount of time so I get the videos out. But that needs to come out a little more. That is certainly an option if you are working someplace where you got a cabin in the woods or something, don't have any power. or don't have a saber saw, you can certainly do that. Now, this cut, remember, I'm using this piece this is not a throwaway piece that's on the end. This is not waste. So I want to try to get exactly on the line as I cut along here. To put a decorative element on the center slat, I'm going to cut out a heart-shaped opening in it. I just sketched the heart out roughly on a piece of poster board, folded it over, and then cut it with the scissors. And by folding it over, both sides end up the same, so you get a symmetrical figure there. And I just used the drill to get rid of most of the waste, and then a chisel to go around the edges and clean it up. Just remember to put a scrap board underneath this when you do this, so that you don't break through the back of the board and splinter it out. Those edges are not going to be particularly straight because you are using the saber saw to do it, and it wanders a bit. So what we're going to do is take the plane, and any place that is a little high will knock the high spots off. Also, you can obviously do this with sandpaper. You don't have to have a plane. If you don't have one, it's not a big deal. Go a little deeper than that. And the plane will also take off the roughness from the saw, and that that will reduce the amount of sanding you have to do. Yeah, I was actually going to finish that sentence eventually, but my brain is in 6 directions at once. So let's see if we can get because the blade is so flexible on the saw, you can see it moves back and forth quite easily. You don't always get a cut that is square to the face of the work. So if you take the plane, you can also correct that little issue. All right, that's not too bad. So what I'm going to do is tune the curve up a little bit. Actually, I got it pretty much where I wanted it, so I won't be doing a heck of a lot with it. The file would probably do just as well. Let's see where I have a file here. You can take a file and take off any to fair that curve in there. We can do that, and I think from there we will just sand that off. The other thing you can do is, if you have a spoke shave, you can work the edges a little bit, and what you want to do is you want to work toward the curve. You don't want to go the other way because you could catch the grain and break that off. So you just want to go like that, and that will give you a that'll do most of the work, and you can finish that up with some sandpaper. So basically that's what we're going to do, just clean up the edges, and we'll sand that off to so it's nice and smooth. I want to round this edge over a little bit here, going to take my, what you can do is if you, let's see where that went. You can take the block plane and set it real shallow and just go along and then turn it a little bit. Same thing the other way. So do passes down there. This is set too low. Do passes along there with it set pretty shallow, and just start one angle, turn a little bit, do the same thing, turn a little bit. By doing that, you start with this, and you will, by doing those, I think I need some new markers, folks. You'll make some facets on there. Let me draw that bigger so you can see it. So you'll have here's the top and both sides of it. You'll end up going something like that with angles at those spots, but it'll take the majority of the material off, and then when you sand it, you can just round it over, and that'll give you the round over. I gave everything a light sanding with the random orbit sander, and you can certainly do that by hand if you don't have a sander. It's especially with this kind of wood, it's very soft, so it doesn't take much effort to sand it. So next part will be part 5, and we will stain all these slats and stain the frame, and then we will put it all together, and then part 6 we will work on the portal.